I'm Joanne Dwinell now. I was Joanne Henry. And this is my mom and my dad, great parents. My dad was 17 years older than my mom, but they seemed to be very, very happy. And I'm not sure how soon. I guess I could think about. They had my brother Jim first, and then 17 months later I was born. But they wondered what the heck are we gonna do now. But anyhow, times were tough then, really tough. My dad drove a streetcar, an old streetcar, for 17 years, and I know they didn't make any money hardly, but I know we spent an awful lot of time with my grandma and in Denver, and every holiday meal, everything was planned around Granny, but my grandpa Jim, we called him Gulliver because he was never there. He was out traveling all the time, and he was kind of a bum, but he played a guitar, he played a piano, whatever, and he'd travel along and stop at a restaurant usually, and he'd play for money, or he'd do dishes for money to get to the next little town, wherever. Yeah, that was Gulliver. But he was a sweet, sweet man. In fact, he came, when you kids were little, he came to the house and would play the piano. Yeah. Oh, when I was little, I was very sickly. I mean, I had asthma really bad, and I didn't breathe a lot. I had croup at night, and actually my aunts, I think, hated me because they had to sit up with me so often at night and listen to me breathe and not breathe. And anyhow, it got so bad that they told my mom, don't bother buying her no more clothes because she ain't gonna live. And they sort of just treated me like that all the time until I was about 6 or 7, I think, maybe a little older. My dad got real sick. He had a heart attack, and but we had moved. We were living kind of out in the country. It's called Lee's Lane then, but it snowed really, really hard. I mean, we had a huge snowstorm, and my dad was so sick, and so Mom kind of threw me out in the snow with Larry because she didn't. Or with Jim. I mean, Larry wasn't here yet. Anyhow, after being out in that snow and playing, I started getting well. I did, and I finally became a pretty normal kid. But I remember at that same time, Jim got a bicycle. I don't know how probably his aunts, probably our aunts, got it for him. And I had a tricycle. It was harder than heck to try to keep up with a bicycle when you're on a tricycle. But I did it. Yeah. And we got an allowance. I got 10 cents. Yeah. I don't know what I had to do to get that, but I loved I loved a bottle of Pepsi. Oh, that was so big. And I had a little set of dishes. And I'd walk. It was like over a mile to the little grocery store and get my Pepsi. And I'd come home. Oh, and I had a dollhouse. My dad built me a dollhouse. It was just adorable. And I'd sit out there with my little dishes and my Pepsi and play like I was grown up. And then Dad, I don't know what got into him, but he decided he was going to go in the goat business. And he put goats in my playhouse. Yeah, I was kind of an upset kid. Yeah. And that was about the same time that at Christmas, of course, we went to my grandma's, and they gave me a great big teddy bear for Christmas, and oh, I love that thing. And then we got ready to leave, and no, you can't take the bear with you. That bear sat on Grandma's, on her piano. I never got to see that, or to bring that beer home. Isn't that rotten?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking. But anyhow, when I got old enough and got my job at this dry goods store, the big teddy bear came in there. And I put him in layaway, and I paid him, paid a little bit until I paid my bear off. Maybe that's why I like bears. About the same time that Dad had the goats out in my playhouse, along came Larry. And my dad was really sick, and so he'd had one heart attack, and then he'd had, the doctors, they knew he was going to have another one if we didn't get out of the altitude in Denver. So his sister lived in Kansas City, and we moved to Kansas City on a train.
Oh.
Yeah, it was during the service. And I ended up having to stay. I had no seat on that train. My childhood was not a fun time, let me tell you. But Mom sat with Larry and Daddy, and I don't know where Jim was kind of just wandering. And I didn't have a seat either. And there was this couple that had been in the service, and they were so happy and in love. And they let me sit next to them, and it was so nice to meet some strangers that were nice. But I had never felt heat. This was in August. No, 4th of July. That we got into Kansas City, and I had never felt sweat before. And I couldn't figure out what's wrong. My skin's leaking. It was miserable. And we had nowhere to live. And my aunt took us in for a while, and then I think she was a cousin, took us in Corning, Kansas. And we lived in an apartment for a little while. And again, no beds. And Jim and I both slept on the floor with our heads hanging out the window. There wasn't air conditioning then or nothing. And I don't know this for sure, but I think my aunt, my daddy's sister, bought a place for us in Tonganoxie, Kansas. And and that town was so tiny that for a while I thought I was going to have to be an altar boy, because they couldn't get enough boys. They were going to put me in as an altar boy. It was kind of pretty there. I remember walking up a meadow to church. I had to go to church, boy.
And what kind of church?
Catholic, yeah. I was a Catholic boy. I was beat into me. Yeah. Well, we went to that. Everybody, I guess all the relatives were taking us in. Because one of them lived in Axtell, Kansas. And Jim and I started school there. A little one-room school. It was, you think about it, but we had to walk way over a mile to get there. And in the winter, I don't know why, but the aunts sent Jim a coat, a pea coat. It was a nice warm pea coat, but they didn't send me one. And so we would leave for school in the morning, and when we get away from the house, Jim would take off that coat and wrap it around me to walk to school. Yeah.
Well, you really had a close relationship with him.
Oh, yeah. We did. He was always so good to me, where most boys didn't want their sister hanging around.
Right.
He was really my protector. But back to the little school, the little old school. We used to have to go gather wood, and before we had to go heat the school then to start. Yeah, in a one-room school. You hear these stories and you think that can't be true, but I did it. Yeah. I don't remember what kind of grades I got. I don't think I was never too much into school. Except
What's your grandma's name? Granny.
Anna Brennan. Yeah, Granny and Jim. Yeah, before my dad got the filling station up and running, he got real sick again. And the doctors, he said, I don't care if I die. He said, I'm going back to Colorado. And he had this old Essex. Have you ever heard of an Essex car? And so Jim would have been 15. Yeah, he was 15 and I was 13. And Jim drove the car pulling a trailer because Daddy was so sick he couldn't. And, yeah, and we stopped at a Philly or a grocery. We had never went to a restaurant and ate a hamburger or ever, just crazy. But we stopped at a little store, and I'm sending you a big bouquet of roses by Eddie Arnold was on the jukebox. And I'll never forget that. Every time I hear that song, I still remember that trip. But Larry or Jim got us back to Colorado. Yeah, and that's when we bought that little filling station and grocery store. Yeah, and well, we had the grocery store just barely going. And one night, Jim and me and some other friends decided to go out and party for Halloween. And anyhow, so we were out partying and we ran out of beer. So Jim's, I'll go get the beer. So he takes his car and drives to town, and he's pretty drunk evidently. But anyhow, a cop stopped him, and instead of just being nice, he got out and slugged the cop. So, and it was kind of like now, the election year and everything. He went to jail, and we couldn't get him out, and because of the election, we couldn't find a judge. And so anyhow, to make a long story short, he ended up having to either go to jail or go to the Navy for 4 years. Oh, it just tore me apart. And the worst part was he was the guy that ran the filling station.
Okay.
And he hated it.
Oh.
And every time he came home, I just knew he was going to go AWOL. He didn't know how to go back.
Right.
It was really hard. Yeah. But anyhow, I ended up running a filling station. Yeah.
As a teenager.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So we got back to Arvada, and he bought this little filling station. I don't know how we did it, but I think still it was probably his sister putting up the money for everything that we did. But anyhow, that's where we were living. The little filling station had a row of buildings in the back of it, and an outhouse. We didn't have any plumbing in the house, of course. And that's when my dad was outside working on the old an Essex. Now that is really an old little square car. I don't know if I got any pictures of it. But he's out there working on it, and I'm out. If I was a big girl then, I thought I was 13 years old and I'd learned how to smoke cigarettes. And while he was working, I went to the very end of the buildings out there to go to the bathroom. But I was just really going there to have a cigarette. And I caught the dang cigarette, dropped it, and it caught the building on fire. And I dropped. Anyhow, I come running back to the house with a bucket, and Dad's like, "Where are you going?" I said, "Those chickens are thirsty." And he acted like he didn't have a clue what was going on. I laughed about that so much, wondering why he didn't say anything. But I do understand now, I think. But yeah.
What do you understand?
That was his way of, letting me just see how far I'd go with that lie. But I went, I was carrying that water and I got the fire out.
And the chickens were no longer thirsty.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyhow, 2 nights after that, I lost my dad. Yeah, he died. He died. He didn't die in the house. We called a doctor, and he came to the house. They used to do that in the middle of the night, make a house call. Yeah, he said he's pretty uncomfortable, so don't ever say that to have a doctor tell you that. But he didn't make it.
Did he give him something to die, or?
He died. He had a heart attack and died that night. Yeah, right after I thought and I'd argued with him that night earlier because I was a big girl and I was going to run with these cowboys. I knew it. And he said, no, I couldn't. And I'm like, yes, I can. Yeah, I'm big. And then he died. So I don't think he won that argument. Yeah. That's what I got.
Okay. I wanted to. Your transition from your childhood to your teenagehood is quite something, but I want to focus one more time on your childhood. After these stories that you've shared, it's fascinating. You really had a hard childhood. How do you feel like that shaped you into the person that you are now?
I think I figured out if you want something, you better go get it. Yeah, I mean, I never had anybody give me anything. From the time, I picked radishes and onions in the fields to make my school clothes when I was, I never had a mother or dad that helped me. They never could, financially. Yeah. That's why I decided to run away.
Did you?
Huh? Did I run away? Oh my God, yes.